Hello again. This video is going to feel a little bit different. I went into this thinking I would just do a lot of research on masculinity as a whole and just sort of summarize and relay that using my own experience with masculinity as a jumping off point so I can dive into something a little bit more deep. The more groups I learned about, there's like the pickup artists, men's rights activists, people who are all into like red pill ideology or black pill ideology. Hadn't heard of that one. Men who go their own way was a like term that I learned. This is not a conversation that I'm trying to open up. If you were threatened by the title of this video, it's not for you. Also, I'm sorry if it sounds like this is going to be like my transition journey. It's not that either. You're welcome here, but that wasn't my experience. I will say that in one of the papers that I was reading through, there was a lot of talk on like vulnerability and using vulnerability strategically rather than empathetically, which was an interesting topic. If you're interested in that paper, I'll link it in the description, but I'm not really going to go much further on it in the video. I thought I'd be able to relay my experience in a way to link it to the general masculinity conversation that is happening on the internet. That's not what this is going to be. This is really just going to be me talking about my experience. And you can make any connections that you want. This one's more for me. So if the tone isn't something you're interested in, if you don't want to hear a guy just ramble and process his own emotions in front of a camera for no reason, you're welcome to click away. But if that is interesting to you, if you like to, I don't know, process vicariously through other people, welcome in. I don't really know, but I'm trying to find out, and that's the deal. Manliness is an interesting topic. What little research I did do on masculinity was I read some articles. One specifically was about the manosphere, and just it was very anti-masculine, which was seemingly in alignment with myself, but I still didn't like what I was reading. It was just too much. I don't know. There were some interesting stuff like transforming insecurity and like vulnerability into domination and control. Not really weaponized incompetence, but similar concept if you are familiar with that. But anyway, I'm not really going to get into all that stuff necessarily. I'll get into it a little bit, but I'm not here to argue or really even discuss other people's ideologies. I'm just going to talk about my experience with masculinity throughout my life and what I grew up thinking manliness was and how I felt about it. I was born a man, and I have never really questioned it. I've never considered myself not he, him. Which I guess makes me lucky, but even though I never questioned whether that was me or not, I didn't always align with traditional roles that were given to me, if that makes sense. So I Googled just like typical manly traits, and I just want to talk about them and see if I align with them or if I don't align with them. So we got stoicism, leadership, courage, strength, dominance, aggression, competition, violence, integrity, stubbornness. I was raised, so a little bit of background on me. I don't know my dad. If you haven't seen my video on daddy issues, maybe go check that out. I never knew my dad. I didn't learn any traditional masculinity from my upbringing. I was raised by a single mom, and I had a sister and aunts. There was an uncle in the picture, but I wasn't raised by them. So I just, for the most part, most of my childhood was around, like, typically women. And every one of those manly traits I was exposed to plenty of through those people. So I don't necessarily see any of these things as manly. So even with Googling this, it made writing this whole video confusing, because I was like, oh, I'm just gonna talk about it, and I don't even see, it doesn't click in my head. Like, I don't see stoicism as necessarily a manly thing, because I think of stoicism as sort of keeping your composure, keeping your pain hidden, your vulnerability hidden, so people don't know of your weakness. And my mom did that all the time to keep us from being aware of how poor we were, or how hard it was to keep us fed. Like that, I never saw the difficulty from her. And that's pretty stoic. So if you were to say, like, I'm going to say a word, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Stoic. I would say mom. Like, that's not manly. So I've just kind of washed all of that through, and it's meaningless. I don't know. If you think that makes you manly, maybe it does. I don't think. I just don't think it's a manly thing. I just think that's a strength thing. All right. Now, something that is a little bit more fun. This is the stuff that I grew up assigning to men. These are actual, just like, typically the boys in my life that I started to befriend or started to know throughout school, they liked, and less girls liked. Not none, but it was just a more typically kind of gendered thing, like sports, which was also not necessarily a boy-girl thing, because I did think soccer was more of a girly thing and basketball was more of a boy thing, because I didn't know any girls who played basketball. But my sister did play soccer her whole life, so that's not really a manly thing. I don't know. Yeah, as I go down this list, I want to express that my issues with my dad and masculinity, I think a lot of my resentment and discomfort with not knowing about, like, a male role model it showed itself in resistance. Like, I didn't want to be like that person. So if things presented as typically boyish or manly, I tended to avoid it. I would like it less if it seemed manly. Later on, my mom got remarried, and anything that stepdad liked, I actively disliked. It just was a thing that I restricted from myself. And that's really where the title comes from. It's not that I hated being who I was. It's that I hated things that I was supposed to like based on what male figures were in my life eventually. So, working on cars was a big one. One of the very few times I interacted with my stepdad was when he was teaching me how to change a tire and change the brake pads on my car. And it was good that it happened, but because I didn't want to hang out with him, it felt very tense and very forced. And so it made me think like, oh, I don't like working on cars. I don't think working on cars is cool. And so if I knew a friend that wanted to be a mechanic someday, I thought that was strange. I'd be like, that's crazy that you want to be like that. Isn't that a little cringe? I'll just go down the list that I put together. Whiskey and cigars. I kind of lump them together because the vibes are similar, in my opinion. Sports, watching them or playing them. Getting laid, talking about sex, like hooking up with someone and bragging about it. That was a thing that I was very aware of. Those are conversations that I've had a lot in my life just because of the people that were around me. I was a boy in high school. That stuff comes up. Collecting tools, woodworking, or any form of building with those tools. Hard labor, like construction-based jobs. Like I had an uncle who built his house. And while that is cool in hindsight, as a kid I thought like that was eye-rolling. Like, oh, so men build houses. That's lame. Don't like that. I don't want to build a house. I don't want to be manly. I wouldn't want to be like that. Working on cars or talking about cars. What's your favorite car? Having a dream car. Getting in fights, like physical fist fights at school. You didn't want to seem like a punk, so if somebody were to like get in your face, you kind of had to fight them, or else, you know, you'd be labeled a punk. Working out, getting strong, being big. Hunting. I was aware of hunting, but I never lived in a place like nobody. I don't know any hunters. I just threw that in there because it felt right, but I don't actually know anything about that. Ball busting, like people like aggressive humor, like being mean to each other because that's the jokes you want to say. It's like you don't know how to tell a joke without coming off as too nice, so you purposely make your joke centered around basically bullying because that's the vibe. I don't know. To some degree, I'm okay with it because it's like with my friends, I'll pick on my friends too, but there's always a balance. Yeah, for the sake of this video, that's all I ended up writing down. Like the rest of this is just going to be me talking about that. So yeah, I kind of want to just go through a little bit of those and the interesting conflict, because there were times when I wanted to I participated in some of this stuff. When I went to high school, I was automatically put for my elective. They put me in drama class, and I was afraid of getting picked on because, well, let's go back further. Elementary school, I didn't like sports. Middle school, I didn't like sports. I was a very skinny kid. I was a nerd. I played video games. I wore glasses. Very skinny. You can see my wrists now. I've always just been a scrawny dude. And in school, if you don't do manly things, you're picked on. That's a normal thing. I wasn't ruthlessly bullied. I wasn't horrible. My experience was fine. But I wasn't unscathed, and I was definitely middle school and early high school, I was picked on for being gay. The majority of it. That was a big one, being gay, hearing a lot of those slurs at me. And it was just something that made me, I wouldn't say it made me tougher, but it did help me process that when someone insults you, a lot of times it reflects more on them, because I wasn't gay. And that was something that, I won't say luckily, but like I did learn earlier on that people will insult you for like no reason, things that have nothing to do with you. And that is an important thing to learn as soon as you can, because it helps with your confidence. Like, as much as that was a belittling thing, I think it has helped my confidence overall, because generally speaking, if you insult me on something that I disagree on, it doesn't really hurt my feelings. It just makes me not like you. It makes me think that you're kind of just like an asshole. I've adopted that pretty well, to the point where maybe it's actually toxic confidence at this point, because a lot of times when people insult me on anything, I will assume that they don't know what they're talking about and assume that they are just lying. So it kind of makes it hard for me to take valid criticism, because I don't always clock it as valid. Like, if you say I look ugly, I don't believe you. You're just saying that to be mean. Clearly you're saying that to be mean. It has served me pretty well, but it did come from probably being uplifted by my mom pretty regularly, and being picked on only by people that I had already decided I didn't want to be like. Because I didn't want to be manly, the only people that were picking on me were boys who wanted to be seen as tough and manly. So they would pick on me for being skinny or seeming gay, because they would want to talk to me about when I was dating somebody. They'd be asking me like, oh, did you sleep with her yet? And I'm like, shut up. Don't talk to me about that. I don't want to talk about that. And they don't like that. They hear that and think like, oh, you probably aren't sleeping with her because you're gay. And it's like, okay, men are all idiots. And that's what I have to carry, because it makes me feel better about myself, I guess. But it also makes me feel conflicted, because, like, am I not a man then? Like, what am I? I don't know. This wasn't meant to be just me ranting and venting, but it kind of has to be. Like, I don't know. It feels like the most appropriate use of my time for this video. Struggled for a very long time to accept things that were traditionally labeled as manly. I think it was my early 20s when I finally realized that I actually do enjoy collecting tools. Like, I actually like working on stuff. I like building things. Going back to that drama example, I was afraid of getting picked on because I just didn't want the attention. So I asked them to switch drama class to woodworking, and I took the woodworking. But I didn't really want to take the woodworking class because it seemed too manly, so I didn't pay attention, and I didn't admit that I liked it. So if people said, are you enjoying yourself? I'd say, no, it's lame. Looking back, it was really fun. It's actually very fun to build things. I build things now, and it's a good pastime. I like working with my hands. I like using tools. I like collecting tools. I do get a sense of like joy and sometimes pride when I'm walking through Home Depot looking for something that I need for a specific project. My girlfriend and I recently converted an old greenhouse into like a new workable, usable shed, like with insulation and solar. It's awesome. I still don't have any attachment to sports, but that was something that if you were to come up to me and start talking to me about sports, I would instantly clock you as kind of boring. Like, oh, you just want to talk about sports. You must be pretty manly. Not interested. And I don't like that. I don't like that behavior of mine, because it limits me from talking to people that like could be, I don't know, really great to know. I'm kind of just exploring the space as I go. I know that in high school I preferred hanging out with girls because girls were, in my experience, taught to be more vulnerable and talk about like emotional things, and that is stuff that I felt more comfortable talking about rather than, I don't know, other things. But I'm pretty sure I overcorrected. I was trying to avoid being manly, so I was limiting my own options. I didn't want to gain weight. I didn't want to exercise because I was afraid of looking strong. Like, that was a real fear that I had. I felt like if I looked strong, people would think that I'm like I don't know. I just didn't want to accidentally be labeled as manly or tough or strong. And that's crazy. If somebody were to come up and compliment me, I would feel like almost like bitterness. Like, hey, don't say that about me. I'm not a man. Knock it off. But if somebody were to call me a girl, I'd be like, wow, you're a jerk. Like, so how would I be happy? How can I be happy if nothing makes me happy? Like, I'm not happy if you think of me as like girly, and I'm not happy if you call me manly. That was my experience for a long time. I'm only talking about this because I'm not necessarily past it, but I'm deeply through it, processing and trying to grow past this. I do think that has been a long-standing struggle, and I think I feel I'm pretty close to working my way through it. As of the last few years, I'm actually pretty happy with myself. I think I have a lot of strength that I need. I think I have a lot of empathy where it's necessary. I think I am a fairly balanced person. I have my problems. I have deep problems like everyone does, but masculinity and femininity don't really have much to do with my identity right now. I feel pretty secure in who I am, which is nice. But I did think the topic of masculinity would have been more interesting to back it up with some like research articles, like reading some smart people's thoughts. And it didn't really, I don't know, it didn't work out that way. Maybe this wasn't as insightful as I would have liked it to be. I think I kind of just talked about myself, but sometimes I'm going to do that. I like talking about myself. Talking about myself is how I figure myself out. You should try it. It's not exactly right, and this is weird, but I'm going to mention the RuneScape video from earlier. If you haven't seen it, maybe check it out, where I talk about the Feynman technique and talking about my relationship with masculinity and simplifying it so I can, like, condensing 30 years of issues into a little, like, 10-minute moment. It's pretty helpful for me to understand it better. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'll admit, it feels a little selfish to make a video that's just about me processing my own stuff for my own sake, and that's kind of what this is. It's not really for you. Maybe I can pretend to make myself feel better by saying it would. Maybe you can see me doing this and think, hey, you should do it too. I think an important part of what I'm getting at is I didn't necessarily struggle with knowing what my identity was. I wasn't confused. There was never confusion in what I was. It was more frustration in that I knew what I was, but I didn't think I was supposed to like it. I didn't think I was supposed to like who I was. Things that I was naturally drawn to, I convinced myself that wasn't good. That was a bad thing. Bad people like that stuff. I don't want to be a bad person, so I don't want to be associated with anything to do with that. So I restricted myself from anything like that. And I don't think I should do that. I think I should be happy with what I like. As long as I'm not hurting anyone, and as long as I'm allowed to also really enjoy hearing from and experiencing other people's wildly different situations, that's good. That's good. Liking sports wouldn't stop me from doing that. But maybe I was always afraid that it would. I think this stuff is interesting. I've always thought this kind of stuff was interesting. This is the kind of conversation that I would like to have with somebody at a party at like 2 a.m, when people tend to open up a little bit more. That's my story. What is your story? leave a comment if you have something you want to share. If you hate any of the stuff that I was talking about, tell me that stuff too. I might ignore you. If you seem mean, I will probably ignore you. Differences are welcome. Being an asshole is not welcome anywhere. That should be pretty obvious. I think the tone of this one was a little different, and I'm going to say that I'm okay with that. Whether it's true or not, I will become okay with it, and we'll see if the next one can be a little bit more fun and interesting. You tell me.